All right. Well, we are in our final week of the series called Black Box. And just to catch you up, if this is your first time, what we're referring to is the flight data recorder that's on an aircraft carrier. When it goes down, they find the black box. They dig out the data inside of it to try to see what caused the crash. But what people don't realize is that the flight data recorder also registers data all throughout the flight to try to prevent a crash from happening so that the pilot can make corrections. And we take this concept and we kind of compare it to decisions that we make that could possibly wreck our lives or the lives of others. That God does not just show up after a catastrophe in our lives, and He does do that, but God is also present before a catastrophe happens and gives us wisdom and gives us guidance. And we all sometimes make those decisions. Thank you so much. We all sometimes make those decisions that just tear our lives apart or the lives of others. And the reason for that is this. We have all fallen short of the glory of God. And it's really that simple. We all make bad decisions, and sometimes that's the reason that Christ came back and died for us, is because we have all fallen short for the glory of God, and we will never be able to fully function without making catastrophic decisions in our lives. But God's grace is not only apparent when we make those decisions, but God's grace is there before we make those bad decisions in our lives. I did some research this week. According to, I think it was Barna that I usually use to look at statistics and so forth, the average person makes 70 conscious decisions every day of their life, beginning with, what time am I going to wake up? So if you take 70 decisions every day and you multiply that out for a year, that's 25,550 conscious decisions that every person on average makes a year. If you live to the age of 70, you make 1,288,500 conscious decisions. And really the biggest difference in those that live a life that what Jesus calls an abundant life, when He says, I have come that they may have life and they may have it more abundantly, those that have a life that I would say flourishes, and the biggest difference in a life that flourishes and a life that does not really has to do with the quality of decisions that someone makes. One way to say that is this: life is a sum of all of our choices. And that can be a really frightening thought, because when you have so many decisions to make, the odds are that you're going to make some bad decisions along the way. Some really, really bad decisions. And the risk of that's pretty high. And those bad decisions can wreck your life. They can wreck your career. They can wreck your marriage. They can wreck your finances. They can wreck your kids. And so forth. So on. It just goes on and on. They can even wreck your soul if you make the wrong decisions. We can make some really stupid decisions that have some devastating effects in our lives. That is why when it comes to decision making, that you have some of the smartest people in the Bible that are asking for one thing from God when it comes to making wise decisions. And that one thing is this. One word: wisdom. We see that in the life of Solomon, who is referred to as the wisest man that ever lived, but that could be brought into question after we look at a couple of things here in the second part of the message. He was commonly referred to as the wisest man who ever lived. He was the third king of Israel. The first king was Saul. The second king was David. Solomon was David's son. And Solomon became king when he was very, very young. And as soon as he was given the throne, he knew that he had stepped into something that he was not equipped to handle. He was in over his head. And to his credit, he realized that he was way too young for this incredible responsibility. But God came to Solomon, and this is what God said to him. If you want to turn to the 1 Kings, go ahead and turn there in your Bibles if you would like to. By the way, Sarah, and Cherie, I've been meaning to give these to you. These are the Bibles for graduating. All right. So, 1 Kings chapter 3 says this. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, listen to this, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Basically, God is saying, here's a blank check, fill it out for whatever you want, and it's yours. And I have to ask the question, how would you react if you were in Solomon's shoes? I mean, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. What would you ask? You might ask for a situation with your health. You might ask for finances. You might ask for a career. You might ask for something just off the wall and mighty, like for Tennessee but Alabama in football this year, or something like that. But what would you ask if you're just given a blank check? But Solomon does not ask for health. He doesn't ask for wealth. He doesn't even ask for victory over his many enemies that he has and is going to face. This is what he asked for going on from verse 6. Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father, David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son, Solomon, to sit on his throne this very day. Verse 7. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child. That is Solomon humbling himself. And he goes on to say, and I do not know how to carry out my duties. Basically, he's saying, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Verse 8, your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart, wisdom, to govern the people and distinguish between right and wrong. So here's Solomon, who could have asked for anything in the world. And what's he asked for? He asked for wisdom. He asked for wisdom to make decisions in light to the responsibility that he's been entrusted with. He's like, I just want wisdom to make good decisions. Now, some of you guys might be going, well, that's awesome that God came to Solomon and Solomon asked for wisdom and God grants him this. But what James reminds us of is that we can ask for exactly the same thing that Solomon asked God for, and that God's going to give it to us. James 1:5, interesting verse. If any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Now, let me ask you a question. When you're facing or trying to make a difficult decision in your life, what do you ask God for? Do you ask God for wisdom, or do you ask God to give you the answer to the problem that's in front of you? I mean, is it kind of like, God, do I need to take this job? Just let me know. And God could operate that way if he wanted to. I mean, he could operate as if we could go to him and just say, God, I just need you to specifically tell me what to do. But I think a lot of people think that wise decision making is just asking God to tell us specifically what to do and doing it. Now, we're about to have a little bit of fun right now. I'm going to take some of you guys back to the 70s. You guys are going, huh? Were there 70s? When I was a kid, there was this thing, some of you guys are going to remember, the Magic 8 Ball. Yeah, buddy. Who remembers Magic 8 Ball? Raise your hands. Okay. Google it. It's there. Okay, you can Google it. It's there. As a matter of fact, you can still buy these things through Walmart and several places online. Here's the definition of the Magic 8 Ball. The original Magic 8 Ball has all the answers that you could ask any questions. Turn over the Magic 8 Ball, and you'll get its answers. Answer questions about your romance, your friendships, your school, your work, and more great fun for kids and adults. It looks like an 8 ball, as you can see, and you can turn it over. And there's a glass mirror or window there. Has some kind of liquid in there. I had no idea what that liquid is. It's kind of a bluish color. Then you have this little cube that floats around, and it gives you all these answers to any question in the world. And it has like 20 different answers, and you ask this question, and then you shake the ball, and it comes up with the answer like, you know, should I date Susan? And it comes up, and it says decidingly so, or so forth, so on. You know, should I take this job, or should I marry Bob? The outlook is not good, you know, something like that, and all this stuff. As a matter of fact, I was wondering, because when I was a kid, I had one of these. Matter of fact, I got in trouble one time with Mom because we went to Palace Bowling Lanes, and I rode it down the lane. I'll never forget it. My dad was furious because he took off running, and those lanes have oil on them. Yeah, I can tell you what happened next. Or anyway, I've always wondered, do these things work really? When I was a kid, I thought this was how you got answers to tough questions. So, bought one this week. We're going to answer some tough questions today. And I got it and delivered by UPS right to the office. And I couldn't figure out how to open it. And I was still wondering, okay, let's see how adequate this is. And I said, hey, Bob, come here. And I said, you ever seen one of these? Bob, no. Which I was amazed that Bob never seen one of these 8 balls. Me and Bob was the only one in the office. And I said, is Bob Marlowe the smartest man in this room? And I shook it up, and it come up, and it said, absolutely not. I was like, whoa. So then I asked again, I said, is Bob Marlowe the second smartest man in this room? And I shook it up, and it said, decidingly so. They work. So my whole message had to change. Just shake this bad boy up, and you know what job to take or who to marry. But I really think that sometimes people approach God like he's a magic 8 ball. When it comes to life-changing decisions, and they're like, God, is this what you want me to do in my life? And they're waiting for that little cube to float across in their bedroom or living room that gives them the answer. God does not always operate that way. What's it say? Can't predict right now. Okay. But I do think a lot of people that they would never explain it this way, but they just think that wise decision making is just asking, what should I do? And they're expecting and magic 8 ball like answer. God sort of gives us the answer, and in some respects he decides for us. God, should we buy this new house? Decidingly so. Should I marry this guy? Absolutely not. And we take that and we hope that God would put that plane in front. Now sometimes, I have to admit, sometimes he does. Sometimes he does answer things in ways that he closes doors and the answer is there for us. For example, a few years ago, probably about 10, 12 years ago, there was a outfit called COI, Christian Outreach International. And it was a global mission organization that we did a lot of mission trips through. We went through Czech Republic with them 4 or 5 times. My oldest daughter spent 2 months on the mission field kind of with their assistance. We went to Mexico with them. I got to know a couple of the missionaries, one of them particularly well. And about that time, Jill and I knew that we were being called in a different direction. And we knew that we were being called to foreign missions. On my account, we were going to Belize. On her account, we were going to Bahamas because Bahamas needed a church. But we were being called somewhere on a mission field. And I'm sitting in my office one day, and we've been praying about it for months. And my phone rings in my office, and secretary patches it through, and I answer the phone. And this voice says, Barry Mayfield. And I said, yes, sir. So this is Jack Isler. I said, hey, Jack. I never met Jack ever in my life. But I knew who he was because he was the founder of COI, Christian Outreach International Mission Organization. He said, I'm in Knoxville. Can you drive out to the airport Hilton and have lunch? I said, sure. Never met him before in my life. So I drove out there. We sat down and had lunch. He said, I know I've never met you. He said, but I've talked a lot with Joni. I've talked a lot with Jimmy. They know you rather well from doing mission trips. And I would like to give you an offer. And here I am in the middle of praying about what God's leading us to. I said, I'm listening. He said, I would love for you to be our campus pastor. I'm like, great. What is that? He said, what that means is you could stay located in Knoxville once a month. You fly somewhere in the world. You spend a week at that base, and you encourage and pray with the missionary that's there permanently. And then you come back for a week. Couple of weeks, you fly again to another base, and you're just all over the world just praying and supporting our pastors. I said, okay. I said, let me think about it. I gave him the church answer. Let me pray about it. But I was really going to pray about it. And I did. I said, in 2 weeks, Jack, I'll call you back, and I'll give you an answer. I prayed about 2 weeks. I called him on 2 weeks later on a Monday morning. Lady answers the phone. I said, is Jack there? And it was just an awkward silence. I'm like, this is COI. Yes, sir. Can I speak to Jack? Who's calling? I told her. She said, okay. Did you not know that Jack died Friday? I'm like, what? She said, Jack had a massive heart attack in his office and passed away Friday. I'm like, whoa. No, I did not know that. So I gave my condolences, hung up, called Joni in Czech Republic, and Joni said, and this was God's answer, the way he answered me to my understanding. I said, Joni, we were going to probably take that position. I said, what can you tell me? She said, here's what I can tell you. She said, you run as far as you can run. I said, why? She said, because Jack's daughter's taken this organization over, and her understanding of the scriptures are nowhere near yours. It would be a catastrophe. Do not take this position. As a matter of fact, I turned in my resignation this morning. And I trusted her enough to say, thank you. God does answer black and white sometimes. Not that she was wrong, just that we would not be compatible to work together in that situation. But God doesn't always do that. When we're being faced with different decisions that shapes and forms our lives, God allows us to make the decision ourselves. Why? Because it shapes our character and who we are in life. If you are a parent or have been a parent of small children, you know exactly what that's like because you were their magic 8-ball for the first umpteen years of their lives. You told them what to wear. You told them when to get up. You told them what food they were going to eat. You told them what time to go to bed. You told them what they could do and couldn't do. We're making all these decisions for your children, but as they grow up and they mature, you don't want to be in that same type of relationship with your children. Neither does God. God wants us to mature in His Word. And that's what leads us to make good, sound decisions. Now, you don't want to be the magic 8-ball and tell your 27-year-old, yeah, son, I think you ought to marry her. She's a nice girl. Or, yeah, son, that's a job for you. Or you need to purchase that house. You want them to make those decisions. You want them to own their decisions and bear a sense of responsibility. And for them to know that this is a decision that they are making as now a mature adult. Sometimes God plays with you a little bit, though. He did with us. We were in, where were we at? Maybe Mission Field, I guess, in Guatemala. Came back. Brenna comes over. Just sitting on the couch, nothing specifically. And I said, so what's happened while we were gone? She said, we bought a house. I'm like, you bought a house? Yeah, we bought a house. We had no idea they were even looking at a house. I said, you bought a house? You should have let me go see this house and talk with, what'd you pay for it? Did you pay too much for it? Did it have a warranty? Here I am stepping in. Then I backed off and said, Great. You're crazy. Great. I hope it works great for you. And I had to let them know, okay, this is your decision. Own it. And this is going to build you. This is going to make you a character. This is going to teach you either it's a good decision or a bad decision. And sometimes, guess what? We make decisions that break other people's hearts. Sometimes our kids make decisions that break our hearts. And God allows us to do that. God sometimes we make decisions that breaks God's heart. And he allows us to do that because we can learn through bad decisions. We really can. Some of the greatest things that builds people is the experience of making a bad decision in their life. I will never do that again. And that builds us. That gives us wisdom. That makes us understand why you're never going to do that again. But in the process of making these decisions that shapes and forms our character, the process that shapes us into the person that God wants us to be, that's why James does not say this in this verse. He does not say, if any of you are facing a really tough decision, just ask God for the answer, and he will reveal it to you. That's not what James says at all. What James says is this. If any of you are facing a really tough decision, just ask God for what? Wisdom. He will give you a discerning heart and an understanding mind so that you can make, in this particular case, a wise decision. And that is why the pursuit of wise counsel, which is where I want to end this whole series. The pursuit of wise counsel is such an important part of making wise decisions. Not so others can make the decisions for us, but so we can make wise decisions. If you want to experience the wisdom that God has promised in his word, you have to surround yourself with people of wisdom, with people of good character, with people of that you trust, people that have good judgment, people who love you, people who care about you. That's what leads you to make wise decisions. And give them, this is important, give those type of people permission to speak into your life. Allow them to speak into your life and assist you to pursue wise counsel. Not just give them permission, invite them in to speak to your life. Proverbs says this, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listens to advice. Now, why does the way of the fool seem right to them? Because they're fools. I mean, that's why. That's the definition of a fool. A fool is convinced that they are always right. A fool is convinced that they know the best in every situation, and they are convinced that they have everything figured out. Some of y'all thinking, have you met my teenage daughter? A fool does not seek wise counsel because they've already got all the answers. They have thought of everything and they don't need any other perspectives in order to make a good decision. And here's the deal. There is a fool in every single one of us. There's a fool in me. There's a fool in you. Get ready to have fun. Turn to the person next to you and simply say, there's a fool in you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Debbie, just tell him once. Just tell him once, okay? Steve's just sitting there. But there's a fool in every one of us. The two words that are used most in Proverbs to describe someone that is not wise are this: a fool and simple. And in Proverbs, to describe someone that is not wise in their decision making is the word simple and fool. And in Proverbs, both the simple and the fool lack wisdom. But there's a huge difference in Proverbs between the two. Although they mean the same thing, there's a huge difference between the two. The difference is this. The simple is someone that is teachable, someone that can be taught, and the fool is not. The simple listen to wise counsel of others, and a fool will not. The simple is open to being corrected when they're wrong, and the fool just gets defensive every time that you try to convince them that's not a good decision, and points out something else that may be amiss in you instead of in their own decision making. Listen, I'm no different than any of you. I've made tons of bad decisions, and I've really dumb decisions in my life. Decisions that's hurt me, decisions that's hurt others, and I wish I could say that all these decisions were made before I became a pastor. And when I became a pastor, I was filled with this great wisdom to where I surrounded myself with all these spiritual giants, and I stopped making these dumb decisions. If you think that's true, it's not. Ask my wife, she will tell you. I still make dumb decisions. Thank you for not responding. But I can tell you that when those dumb decisions were made, almost every one of them were made when I isolated myself from wise counsel because I knew I was right. I made them in isolation from anyone who had any kind of spiritual wisdom that could have helped me along to a better decision. Now, sometimes it was not total isolation. Sometimes I would surround myself with people that would just be yes men. Yeah, that's right. Pat me on the back and say, that's the right decision. Instead of saying, no, think about the consequences of this decision if you make this decision. Or someone that might say, yeah, these are going to be the consequences of this decision, but the right thing to do by God's word is to make this decision regardless of those consequences. So usually when I made a dumb decision, I was absent of any kind of spiritual guidance. And here's the deal. When you isolate yourself from wise counsel, you can convince yourself of the rightness of almost any situation and any decision that you make, and the smarter you are. You know, I don't know this, but I would say that there's some great benefits to being highly intelligent. Wouldn't you? And we have some highly intelligent people sitting amongst us right now. Who said thank you? Oh, Larissa. Okay. I don't know how to respond to that, so I think I'll just move on. But there's also a downside to being very intelligent. And the downside is this. The smarter that you are, the easier it is to convince yourself that you are right. Does that make sense? The smarter that you are, the easier it is to convince yourself that there is a rightness in the decision that you make no matter what. And if you are smart, you also tend to isolate yourself from any kind of godly wisdom because you don't need any kind of counsel or guidance to be able to speak into your life and to change the situation. And that's what fools do. I was trying to think of some dumb decisions as I was growing up and whatever people did and so forth, so on. Randy, sorry. Remember when Coke changed their ingredients? What an outcry that was. The new Coke. The new Coke is now the classic Coke. Is that right? They had to go back because there was such an outcry. Because in people's mind, this is not what we're used to. This is not what we had. And I guarantee you, it was a wise person that made that decision to do that. It was probably Randy that made that decision and say, hey, let's just change it. It's been successful since 1860 or whatever it is. Let's just change it. Well, that didn't go too well. And there's all kinds of decisions that wise people make decisions. But when it comes to decisions that affect your lives greatly, and you're going to be a fool about it, fools, it says, tend to not accept any kind of wisdom. Listen to what Proverbs says. Proverbs 12:15. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. And then Proverbs also reminds us that there's another way. And in Proverbs 19:20 it says this. Listen to advice and accept, Discipline. There's a word that we love. And at the end, you will be counted among the wise. Now, ironically, one of the greatest violators of that proverb was Solomon himself. The wisest man that's ever walked the face of the planet besides Jesus Christ, of course. The guy who was credited with having written this. Solomon, who early in his life had asked God for wisdom when he could have asked for anything in the world, and he chose wisdom. The same Solomon who later in life ignored that same wisdom. And it shows up in a lot of different places. But none more apparent than in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 3. I will comment on it after I read it, but I don't think I really have to. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. The husbands right now are thinking, should I chuckle at this or just keep my mouth shut? Here's a little piece of wisdom. Don't have 1,000 wives and concubines. Just don't. Can you imagine what was in his ear when he was trying to make decisions? Can you imagine the tension, the influence, the anger, the difference of opinions? Goodness gracious. There's a show on TV right now that I've caught a couple episodes on. I'm done. Where guys like, is it Sister Wives? I'm like, really? What is wrong with you? So not only did Solomon violate God's own law to begin with, 1,000 wives and concubines. Andy, you want to comment on this? No, I don't think I would either. Okay. He's got a good one. He don't have to. Good job, Andy. All right. This was not a wise move on the part of the wisest man that ever lived. I'm just telling you. It wasn't. And one of the things that Solomon's life reminds us of is that this battle for wisdom, it never ends. It never ends. I mean, you may have demonstrated great wisdom and decisions in the past, and that does not mean that you're immune from making dumb decisions in the future. And totally wreck your lives and wreck the lives of those around you. We all have weaknesses. I've mentioned before I've done prison ministry several times. Three people stand out in my mind when I talk about prison ministry. One of them is a guy named Stephen. Stephen was 23 years old, clean-cut guy that you would see just working out in everyday life. And I met him in Perry, Georgia, at State Penitentiary, and serving 3 years. And at that time, he had a 1-year-old baby. And I asked a question you're not supposed to ask, but I asked him. I said, Stephen, why are you here? I hung out with him the day before. This was the second day. And he kind of chuckled. I tell you who he looked like. He looked like Robbie. He looked almost exactly like Robbie. I said, Stephen? I said, why are you here? And he chuckled. He said, I've never even had a speeding ticket in my life, ever. He said, I was laying on the couch. He said, I wanted a Snicker bar and a pack of cigarettes. He said, I didn't have any money, but I had a BB gun. I went to 7-Eleven. I held him up for a Snicker bar and a pack of cigarettes. In the state of Georgia, if you're convicted of armed robbery, you're 3 years automatic. He said, I'm spending 3 years for a Snicker bar and a pack of cigarettes. I never had a speeding ticket. Let me tell you something. Great people, smart people, good people make dumb decisions. They make dumb decisions. And it never ends. You can make wise decisions your whole life, but you're still going to be faced with decisions that you have to have wisdom. And guess what? We all have weaknesses, and we all have blind spots. It does not matter how many great decisions you've made or what your track record is up to this point. We all have weaknesses and blind spots, and that is why we desperately need godly people to speak into our lives. Some of you guys might be able to relate with this. You work in the secular world. They know you're a Christian, people you work with. And more times than not, 4 out of the 5 working days of the week that you might be working, some of the people may not ever want anything to do with you because they know you're a Christian. But when a crisis comes up in your life, you know who they're more than likely going to come to? They're going to come to you. Some of them are going to come to you and say, look, I'm facing this in my life. And they say this, can you pray for me? I hate when people say this. I may not be able to do it. All I can do for you is pray for you. That limits the power of prayer. All I can do is pray for you? No. I will absolutely pray for you, and that's powerful. So we all need godly wisdom, godly people to surround us in our lives. We desperately need that in our lives. Godly people who can process things with outside of what we're facing. They can put themselves in a different position and look at it. And I also wonder if we did that, if we all did that, how much devastating pain and brokenness can be avoided in the lives of Christians. How many marriages would be saved if we were more than willing to speak or let one wise person in our life? How many financial messes could we avoid if we followed godly wisdom? How many people would be using their gifts right now and really reflect their passion in their heart? How many kids would be having a better relationship with their parents if we had godly wisdom in our lives? How many innocent children would be saved from being slaughtered in the abortion clinics if people sought godly wisdom? Now, some of you might be going, "Barry, it's a great message, great series, but your timing is really, really bad. I wish you'd have done this series 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe a month ago, maybe last week, because I've already made some decisions. I feel like I fall into that unredeemable category in. I'm the one that had the abortion. I'm the one that had the affair. I'm the one that whatever." So some of you guys may be falling into that category where you feel like it's unredeemable. I've already alienated my child, and now there's no relationship there. I've violated my integrity. I've compromised my values. Whatever it may be. If you find yourself saying that, I want to remind you of 2 things, and we're going to close. The first one is this. It is impossible to make a decision, or even a lifetime of decision, that God cannot forgive, redeem, restore, and ultimately use you. Let me say that again. It is impossible for anyone to make any decision, or even a lifetime decision, that God cannot forgive, redeem, restore, and ultimately use you. Some of you guys are saying, "You talking about me?" Yeah, I'm talking about you. The only decision that is unredeemable is the decision to say no to God's redemption and forgiveness. That's it. But outside of that, there's not a decision or a lifetime decision that God cannot forgive you of, redeem you of, restore you of, and ultimately use that. You see that all throughout Jesus' ministry. Even as he is hanging on the cross. Think about this. Even as Christ is hanging on the cross, he's about to breathe in his last breath. And the guy beside him on the other cross next to him, who's a thief, who his whole life has been characterized and shaped, and everyone knows him as he's identified as the thief on the cross. He's not given a name. He's the thief on the cross. That's what his whole life has been. His whole life has been characterized by choices of deceitfulness and bad decisions and greed. But in this last moment, as he's about to draw his last breath too pretty soon, he makes this different kind of decision. And he decides to lean into God's grace and to lean into God's forgiveness and God's mercy. And he says this to the creator of the universe, to the God of all God and the King of all kings. He says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Stating to himself, there's no way I'm going to be able to join you there. I'm dirty, I'm filthy, I'm rotten, I'm a sinner, I'm broken. But remember me when you come into your kingdom. How did Jesus answer that? I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. Boom. Just like that. I see a smile on Chris Lawson's face, and I want to smile right back. Because let me tell you, folks, that's grace. That's love. Someone posted a thing on Facebook yesterday, and it's Charlie Brown. It might have been one of you guys. And Lucy leaning against a rock, and she says, what is true love? And Charlie Brown goes, a man named Jesus Christ. This right here is love. This right here is redemption. This is restoration that God can use. And God, and some people, this was 2,000 years ago. Some of you guys might be saying, how's he going to use that? The guy died like 5 minutes after. We're still talking about it, aren't we? We're still talking about this decision 2,000 years ago where a guy was a thief. He leaned into the grace and the mercy of Christ, and God said, join me in my kingdom. Let me say this again. There's not a decision or even a lifetime of decision that God cannot forgive, redeem, restore, and ultimately use. And here's the second thing. With God, the decisions that matter the most are the ones that you make from this moment forward. Not the ones you made in the past, but the ones that you make from this point forward. So here's what I want to do. As our children are having a rock concert. Listen, I know that some of you guys might be facing some really difficult decisions. I had to face some difficult decisions just not long ago. And I sought out 3 people in my life that had nothing to do with the decision. And I said, God, one guy's name's Tony. I said, Tony, help me out here. And he spoke just godly wisdom in my life. And some of you guys may have walked in this place this morning facing something in your life that you need wisdom. But you're afraid to share that thing in your life with God or anyone else because you're shameful about it. We're all fools. We all make bad decisions. But I'm a fool that's been saved by grace. There might be some of you here that you've done something and you feel like that's the unforgivable, the unpardonable, the unredeemable sin in your life. Let me tell you something. No. It's not. Jesus Christ died on the cross for you and me, and we don't have the power to steal that away from him, except for us saying no when he invites us to become one of his children. That's it. I'm not going to ask you to reveal what it was, but I'm going to ask you to reveal. How many here would say that you've done at least one thing in your life that you are absolutely shameful to say that you did it? Raise your hand. Okay, I don't see anyone that didn't raise their hand, so we can skip the message on lying next week. We're all sinners. Every single one of us. I got saved in 1980. A little church called Fort Hill Baptist Church. I never will forget it. I had no idea. I mean, I knew what I was doing, but I thought that was it. I'm done. I did it. That was just the beginning of a life with Christ. I didn't understand that for many years. Many years. I've said this, I know you guys get tired of me saying this. Stop coming to church, start being the church. There's a huge difference in that. Stop coming to church and start being the church. Well, I got, I gave my life to Christ. I was about 2 years old. I think, no, you didn't. It has to be a conscious decision of you understanding what grace and what Christ dying on the cross meant for you. And if you really got saved, but you feel like you messed up so bad, but you know that you got saved, but you need to do it again, Christ don't have to get crucified again. He only took one crucifixion, okay? Well, I got baptized when I was a baby. No, you didn't. You got wet. But let me say this. I had a discussion with someone who reminded me of this. Going to church never saved anyone. Being baptized never saved anyone. One thing is salvation. You know what that is? That is surrendering your life to Jesus Christ. Do you hear the music from heaven playing? Yes, that is surrendering your life to Jesus Christ. And it's just like when you enter a covenant of marriage with your bride or your groom, you say, I do. Then he does. And you're his child. I want to be around some of you guys when you make dumb decisions. Not because I want to mock you, I want to point, I told you so. Because more than likely, if you're a child of God and a follower of Jesus Christ, he's going to take that dumb decision somewhere down the road, and he's going to use it to glorify him. I've seen it done 1,000 times, over and over and over, from addicts, from alcoholics, from people that's had abortions. He's done it. He takes that shame that Satan wants you to heap on your shoulders, and he turns it to glory. And he shows people, this is who I was, but this is who I am now. Listen, there's nothing that is broken about you that God cannot fix. You get that stuff at Big Lots, okay? You can't fix that stuff a lot of times. God can break anything. I mean, God can heal anything in your life that's broken. That's why I'm pleading for you right now. Well, I've given my life. That's great. You're a believer. You're a follower. Then stop carrying the baggage around. Let go of it. Let God fix it. Let God carry it. He's asked you to. Let's pray. Father, I just come to you right now, Lord, and I